As we move past the summer and into the autumn, we can count on certain things: the leaves changing colour, the weather growing crisper, ghost stories being told in certain parts of the world, and the celebration of the Bavarian tradition of Oktoberfest. Even as far away as America, Oktoberfest is beloved as a time for dancing, dressing in lederhosen, eating sausages, and of course, drinking beer. But what are the origins of Oktoberfest? What are we joyously celebrating, and do you actually have to wear very unflattering lederhosen? On October 12, 1810, the Bavarian Crown Prince Ludwig married Princess Theresa von Sachsen-Hildburghausen, a grand ceremony in the Bavarian city of Munich. In order to involve the commoners, the couple and their royal parents organized a giant wedding party for the entire city of Munich outside the city gates upon a piece of cattle grazing land. An estimated 40,000 Bavarians showed up ready to party and have fun, and they certainly did. Feasting, drinking, dancing were among the major highlights. Horse races, no doubt with huge wagers on the line, closed the festivities with the prince and his new bride cheering the ponies on. The party was so memorable that the meadow outside the city gates was renamed Theresienwiese, or Theresa's Fields, in honor of the blushing bride. Today, that meadow is known as Wiesen, an abbreviation of the original name, and is still the site of the annual Munich Oktoberfest. A year later, the Bavarian royalty, fully aware that the celebration earns them tons of goodwill from their subjects, decided to do it again, this time with more horse races and an agricultural fair. And they celebrated again in 1812 and for the next 200 years, save for the 24 times that Oktoberfest has been cancelled due to wars and cholera epidemics. So, formally, Oktoberfest is a celebration of the wedding between Prince Ludwig and Princess Theresa, who would later become King Ludwig and Queen Theresa of Bavaria in 1825. However, Oktoberfest-like events, though not on this scale, had been going on without an official name for many, many years before that event. More than celebrating a marriage, Oktoberfest is a commemoration of the glorious process of beer making. The earliest known, purposefully concocted alcoholic beverage dates back about 9,000 years to China, with a treat made of rice, honey, and fermented fruit. The first barley beer can likely be traced to the Middle East and the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia of 5,000 years ago. In 1992, archaeologists in the region uncovered ceramics with a beer-like residue on it that was estimated to be from 3,500 BCE. One of the earliest pieces of human writing is the Hymn of Ninkasi, not only an ode to the Sumerian goddess of beer, but an actual recipe for ancient beer from 3,800 years ago, but in all likelihood the recipe is even older than that. From there, the art of beer making traveled around the globe. It is well documented that the Egyptians and Romans enjoyed the beverage, with recipes and the types of beer varying with the region. In fact, beer was much more popular in places like England, Germany, and other European countries, where it was nearly impossible to grow grapes and have vineyards due to the colder weather, rendering the other popular alcoholic beverage of the time, wine, virtually a non-entity. By the Middle Ages, hops were being added as a preservative and for taste, bringing beer closer to what we know it as today. For years, people made and drank top-fermented beers, a process where fermentation occurs at a range of 62 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit or 16.6 to 25 degrees Celsius, causing the yeast to rise to the surface. This created ale, while adding hops made it a beer. It is speculated that bottom fermentation, or as it is known today, lagering, was discovered by accident in the 16th century when beer was stored in cool and dry caverns that were around 46 degrees Fahrenheit or 7.8 degrees Celsius for a long period of time. So what does any of this have to do with Oktoberfest? As you might have deduced from this, certain types of beer, or ales, or lagers if you want to get technical, can only be made under certain conditions, usually relating to temperature. Considering refrigeration is a relatively modern invention, this meant the kind of beer that could be made was typically reliant on the time of year and the weather. Ales, stouts, porters, and wheat beers are all part of the top-fermented beer family, and therefore were made when the temperatures were warmer. Lagers, pilsners, and bocks, as well as American malt liquor, are examples of bottom-fermented beers and were made in the cold winter months. Thus, as the summer turned into fall, Bavarian beer makers' new production was halting on their ales, stouts, etc., and beginning on the lagers, pilsners, and so forth. Considering German autumns get cold pretty quickly, late September, early October was a perfect time to drink the rest of the summer beer and try the first fresh batch of winter beer. In other words, the wedding of the prince and princess was just a perfectly timed excuse to get drunk with the abundance of beer available. available. So when you head out for Oktoberfest this year, remember that you are not only celebrating a wedding, but the perfect time to try all of the variations of beer and, of course, wear lederhosen. And now for some bonus facts. If it's called Oktoberfest and it celebrates a wedding that occurred on October the 12th, then why does it start in September? Well, that's due to the almighty tourism dollar. In the early 20th century, Germany realized that this festival was a major tourist attraction and lengthened the festival. It extends into September because the weather is better in Germany in September than it is in mid-October. And now for another bonus fact. October got its name from the Latin octo, meaning 8. If this seems odd to you, considering it's the 10th month in the modern calendar, Gregorian, well, that used to not be the case. It was once the 8th month in the Roman calendar, and the name simply carried over. And now for another bonus fact. Ever wonder why in America people say fall for the season, and much of the rest of the English-speaking world call it autumn? Well, the origin of fall as the name for a season is not perfectly clear, though it's thought that it probably came from the idea of leaves falling from trees and many plants, particularly the contraction of the English saying, fall of the leaf. It first popped up as a name for the season in the later 16th century in England and became particularly popular during the 17th century, at which point it made its way over to North America. Of course, calling autumn fall in England has since passed out of widespread practice, but it has survived as a common name for the season in North America. And now for another bonus fact. Well, you might now be wondering why we call the seasons summer, autumn, winter, and spring. Well, want to know more? Winter derives from the Proto-Germanic wentras, meaning winter. This, in turn, probably comes from the Proto-Indo-European PIE, wed, meaning wet. Alternatively, it may come from the PIE wind, meaning white. Either way, the Proto-Germanic wentras gave rise to the Old English winter as the fourth season of the year, and the name for the season has stuck around ever since. Spring, referring to the season rather than the many other meanings of the word, first popped up in the 16th century. Starting in the 14th century, this time of year was called springing time, and then in the 15th century, this got shortened to springtime, and then further shortened in the 16th century to just spring. The 14th century, springing time came about in reference to plants springing from the ground and things like that. Before the season was called these things, it was called Lent in Old English. Summer came from the Old English name for the season sumor, which in turn came from the Proto-Germanic summa, which itself came from the Proto-Indo-European root sam, meaning summer. Sam seems to be the variant of the Proto-Indo-European sem, meaning together or one. Autumn came to English from the Old French autumne, meaning autumn. This in turn came from the Latin autumnus, also meaning autumn. From here things get murky, but it's thought autumnus probably came from an Etruscan word and is possibly related to the Latin augia, meaning to increase. Beyond that, nobody is quite sure why the season was originally called that. Calling the season autumn in English first popped up in the 12th century, though was a rarity until around the 14th century. It then began to pick up steam and became common in the 16th century. About the same time, calling it fall popped up as a name for the season. Before calling the season autumn or fall in English, it was called harvest. Incidentally, you may also wonder why the seasons are called seasons. The word season in this context comes from the Old French saison, meaning sowing or planting. This in turn came from the Latin sationum, meaning sowing. Initially, this referred to actually sowing seeds, but later, as with the Old French saison, shifted definition to refer to the time period when you sow seed, so literally seed time. Season in this sense in English popped up around the 13th century. It was also around this time that season popped up, referring to seasoning food, in this case from the Old French assaisonner, meaning to ripen. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below and also subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell when you do so you can find out when we put out a new video. Also, why not check out our sister channel Today I Found Out? You can find that linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.